Welcome everyone to the Gardenerd Tip of the Week podcast, where we spend time chatting with expert gardening guests and we ask for their favorite tip. I'm Christy Wilhelmi, your host. For the month of July, we're sharing best of tips from interviews we've had in the past. This week, we're focusing on Solanaceae plants, expert tips about tomatoes and pepper growing. First up, a great tip from Connor Fitzpatrick, the owner of Mini Farm Box and Fig Earth Supply in Los Angeles, California. He shares with us some great tips for growing peppers this season. This was recorded back in May of 2019. It is tip time. Do you have a favorite tip that you'd like to share with the Garden Nerd audience?
I do have a favorite tip. I mean, I've learned from so many people, so many different, including yourself, Christy, so many things over the years. The one that really made a big difference to me is because I didn't find out for a long time. And that is peppers have a natural trajectory to grow tall and skinny. But if you cut the crown off when it's small, the crown you would consider, if it was a tree, you would call it the leader.
Yes.
So it's the center piece. It usually has a little flower on it, so you're terrified to cut that off. But what you're doing, if you cut the top of that off, you force all the growth outward in the plant. So you create a bush instead of a long, spindly pepper.
And so you get more plants?
You get much more fruit.
You get more fruit.
And then when they grow out, you cut their crowns off. And then you'll get 4 more bushes. So you can actually create a 3 foot by 3 foot bush instead of a 6 inch by 4 foot pepper plant, and you get so much more productivity from that.
I'm going to go home and do that right now.
And I'll show you outside, actually. I have a little experiment to show people.
Well, that is a really good tip, and nobody's talked about that before. I've seen it in, garden magazines and whatnot, but I, like you said, have been afraid. I'm like, I don't want to cut the top off. But it really makes a difference. So you're saying your harvest is higher?
You get a much bigger yield from them.
That's very cool, because I only grow one pepper of each type that I want. And because I don't use a lot of peppers, but I grow them and I put them in the freezer whole and then use them throughout the year.
Do you like hot?
So my favorite is the fish pepper.
Oh, fish pepper's fantastic.
It's the best pepper.
And it looks so beautiful. It's a variegated, stripy pepper.
Yes.
We had one here this year called 7-Pot Bubblegum.
I have never heard of that.
So it's crazy. This pepper looks like a piece of bubblegum.
Are you kidding?
Yes.
It's pink?
No, it's just all gnarly and kind of...
Oh, like a piece of chewed bubblegum.
And what 7-pot means is one pepper has enough heat in it to do 7 pots of curry, stew, beans, whatever you're making.
Wow, that's a hot pepper.
Yeah.
I just love Connor Fitzpatrick. I could listen to him talk all day. But our next guest, this interview was recorded back in May of 2018, and it's with Barbara Spencer of Windrose Farms. Barbara, if you recall, is a professional grower of tomatoes and seller of tomato plants. She lives in Paso Robles, California, but we interviewed her at Ocean View Farms Organic Community Garden in Mar Vista, California, during Tomatobration. Listen in for some great tips. We're sitting here at Ocean View Farms under the flight path of the Santa Monica Airport and Centinela Avenue, which is quite busy, and that's the noise you hear in the background, listeners. We get a lot of fungal infestations, powdery mildew, early blight, late blight. There isn't really Fusarium wilt and verticillium that we don't really have those, but I've seen Septoria leaf spot and mostly the blights that take down our plants. How do you deal with that in Paso Robles, and how should we deal with it?
Well, we're blessed.
You're blessed. Okay.
We're drier.
You're drier.
We don't have it.
Yeah.
We don't have that much. We actually get like an early blight on occasion.
Okay.
But we've never had the really bad stuff that attacks the stem as well. We just rarely ever get that. And if we do, it'll be an isolated plant that's just not that strong, and we just get them out of there as soon as possible. So actually taking care of things and cleaning is one of the most important things, no matter what it is.
And by cleaning, you mean?
Just cutting off bad leaves, putting them in a bag, and getting them away from everything.
Right. Don't just drop them on the ground next to your plants.
Yeah, don't drop them on the ground. I mean, those blights are here in the garden now. They're here forever. They're not going to go away.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of, there are some resistant varieties, but you're kind of limited with some things.
Yeah.
So basically a whole lot of cleanliness, a whole lot of just fertilize more. We really are fans of just boosting your fertilization thing. It's just like you take vitamin C or emergency or whatever it is you take that's going to support your immune system, you need to think about the plant the same way, and you're going to do the same thing.
So can you walk us through your process of taking care of tomatoes from start to finish?
Okay.
I'm not asking a lot
No,
here.
it's okay. The fertilization is one of the most huge things.
Uh-huh.
Because it used to be that people, you'd open books and they'd say, put some fertilizer in, put some compost in, go, and then forget about it.
Yeah.
If you're, like in California, that's great if you're in Arkansas. First of all, your frost-free zone is not forever.
It's
like
right.
here.
Yeah.
Like here, if you take care of your plants, they'll go through November.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different system than you'll see in a Midwest gardening book, where they'll pick once or twice and that's it, because they're putting in the end of May into June and they're out by the middle of September. You have a whole different calendar.
So we need to fertilize throughout the season.
Throughout the season. You're going to fertilize throughout the season, and we fertilize with a dry fertilizer mix, and we also fertilize with liquid fertilizers.
And what are your liquid fertilizers?
It's basically fish and kelp.
Okay.
And in different percentages, and highly diluted.
Highly diluted.
So we were talking about that this morning. You've got your jug of fish, you've got your jug of kelp.
Yeah.
You're going to mix into another jug, leaving plenty of room for diluting it, and then you're going to dilute it even more.
Uh-huh.
And what goes actually on the plant, no matter what the percentage is going to look like dirty water.
Right. So it's not
you
very
don't
much.
want to waste it. It's not that much. You don't want to waste it. But then, let's say you're fighting something, you can hose and spray every day if you want to.
Yeah.
Which you might want to for a week or so if you're fighting off something.
Yeah, I did an experiment 2 years ago where I brewed active fungal dominant compost tea every 2 weeks and foliar sprayed my tomatoes, and I didn't get a single fungal infestation for the season. That was really exciting.
I think that there's more of that should be done. And I got all excited because when I came in, I saw actually what turned out to be the rain barrels.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, wow, they're doing compost tea.
No, we're not.
No.
We're not, but we do have some. In fact, my first interview of this new format of podcast was with Sherry Powell of Compostina. So we have people in the area who do that. And anyone can brew compost tea as long as your source material is good.
Yeah.
And that's important. That's
and
the important part.
I'm so bad about this and so non-scientific that I think if you've got, it rains and you've got some stuff sitting there, it's still going to be better than nothing.
Yeah.
It
depends. I know there are different schools of thought around anaerobic
I know,
fermentation
there are really
and all
guys
of that.
that say, oh no, you can't do it unless it's this, and this.
Yeah, but things seem to work for
better
you.
Than nothing.
Right, yeah, okay, better than nothing. We get to the point where tomatoes are setting fruit or ripening.
Yeah.
And this is the point, at least here, where you've got these big green tomatoes on the plants, and that's when the diseases start showing up.
Yeah.
So everyone I talk to is like, oh, pull the plant. Nobody's going to pull their plant at that point. So what do we do?
First of all, don't throw the fruit away.
Okay.
At the very least, you got fried green tomatoes.
Exactly.
And that's terrible, but true.
Yes.
And a certain amount will ripen. If they're at a certain point, they will still ripen and not be that bad.
Yeah.
Now, talking to Dean is what he does with some of his, when it's the late blight horrible thing.
Right.
He actually, because we always talk about pruning out suckers and things like that.
Yes.
There's a point in the season, like there, where he lets the suckers grow.
Uh-huh.
And he cleans back all the diseased leaves. And there's a certain point then when, if I understood him correctly, the plant will transition through the disease and the suckers come on.
And you get new growth.
You get new growth.
And it helps.
Has less or none of the disease that the others do.
Got it. Excellent. So Dean, for those listening, is one of our tomato growers here at Ocean View Farms who plants his entire 2 plots full of tomatoes every year, and he's sort of our resident expert on tomatoes.
And he's fantastic because, again, he grows here all the time, and Paso's so different.
Yeah.
That he's a much better source of information than I am.
For local gardeners.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, well, it is tip time. What is the one special tomato growing tip that you would like to share with our garden nerd audience?
This may be the ultimate year. One of the things you're always pulling out of your garden and you want to keep to either dry or use fresh is stinging nettles.
Stinging nettles?
Stinging nettles. You want to make a tea.
Really?
And you can do it out of fresh or you can make it out of dried. And you just it is an antifungal.
So what are we using it for?
That's what's going to help with all those diseases.
Okay, you're going to have to walk me through the process.
Okay, so we all know stinging nettle tea is great for arthritis and everything else.
Right.
It's a medicinal.
Yeah.
It's a medicinal herb, and it turns out to be really good for plants, just as a stimulant growth thing anyway, and it also does a whole bunch of stuff for just disease protection and things like that. And as I say, you can do it as a fresh tea.
So you pick nettles.
You just pull a plant.
Okay.
You don't have to worry. In
Gloves.
fact, don't
wear gloves.
Wear gloves. But if you just pull it up by the root, take the whole thing, wash it down a little bit, put it in a big saucepan or something,
like a bowl or something,
and boil it. Make tea. You're going to use hot water.
Okay. So you're not just pouring boiling water over it. You're actually boiling it.
You can do it either way. You can have a whole thing of boiling water, put it in, turn it off, and let it steep.
Steep for how long?
As long as you want. Again, I'm totally
it's
non-scientific.
Just like,
just do it.
Yeah, just for a few minutes.
Yeah, or let it just cool down. Just put it in there and just set it somewhere and let it cool down.
Okay, so it probably takes about 20 minutes for it to cool or something?
At least. You can let it sit overnight if you want.
Okay.
Just, whatever is.
Screw the particulars.
Yeah.
Just do it.
But you can also, if you get like a fall heart, because nettles tend to go through the winter, is you can pull it and dry it and you'll still be able to use it.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
We fell across it one year when we had some really early plants, and I think we were still going to Tomato Mania, and I looked at these things, and the bottom first leaves coming out were getting that ugly gray kind of curly thing, and I just went,
oh no,
this is not going to work.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know whether it's just, the fairies from the sky or whatever. Right. It's like, well, let's just throw this stuff in there and do it.
And so then after it cools, what do you do with it?
We just mix it in. We just store it in the fridge. We just put it in a jug, just the tea.
Yeah.
And I just keep it in the fridge and just put some in with the kelp and everything else when I feed. So I add it
do a soil drench.
To the soil drench or to the foliar spray.
Oh, foliar too.
Because I use it as foliar. Because again, in that time, we're just doing the little seedlings in the nursery, so they're just getting a total drench.
I see.
Yeah, and that's that whole thing people say, don't get your leaves wet.
Yeah, you're getting your leaves wet.
I'm getting my leaves wet all the
time. I know, that's the thing. You've always said that in your classes, and I'm like, I just don't believe you, Barbara.
Well, New Jersey grows great tomatoes, right?
And it rains all the time.
All the time.
I know.
That was my other line about that. Yeah. So so all the time these plants are being grown,
they're getting foliar sprayed.
They're getting foliar sprayed all the time and getting watered all the time.
So the stinging nettle tip, that is a really good tip. I've never heard of that before.
It works for everything. I mean, it's really good for just supporting everything.
Absolutely going to try that this year.
Barbara Spencer, such a wealth of information. Well, our last tip comes from Scott Daig, co-founder of Tomato Mania. We recorded this podcast over Zoom during the pandemic in July of 2020. Listen in for what he's got to say. Well, the last time you were on the podcast, it was early in the season, and we talked about the beginnings of Tomato Mania and how it came about, and you gave us some great tips for growing tomatoes in hot weather. But here we are now, it's summer, and people are encountering all kinds of issues. So let's talk about some of the common problems what are you hearing from people this time of year as the big issues for growing tomatoes?
The ugliest issue we have out there is blossom end rot, isn't it? BER, the underside of your tomato gets all brown and mushy, and people tend to freak out. We all freak out a little bit about that because it's so right there in your face, right? Like, I've got a bruise here. And so blossom end rot is a huge problem. It mostly happens in the beginning of the season because now, for most experts say it's really connected to inconsistency, where it used to be thought to be a calcium deficiency. So we always say, yes, put some eggshells in the ground, give your plants some calcium, do that. We don't want a deficiency. But most often we do see it in the beginning of the season. We see it in pots more than we see it in the ground. Again, inconsistency. It's harder to be consistent in a container. And there you are. I think this year also we've had really hot minutes, and then we've had really cool.
Right.
I mean, what rain? We've had rain in the end of April and drizzle in May.
Yeah,
so,
the temperature fluctuations have been really weird. We here have had 3 days of really incredibly hot weather, and everything got sad. And now it's like, oh, okay, cool marine layer, whatever. Doesn't know what to do.
Seriously, when am I supposed to play catch up here? And that's what they're doing. If a plant is playing catch up through any part of the season, it doesn't quite know what to do. That inconsistency is what brings around blossom end rot. So we do what we can do. We put the plant in the right place, or move the pot into more or less sun to give it more consistency. We try to be as consistent as we can with feeding and watering. We try to keep I think with container growers in particular, and I think we've talked about this before, just wrapping that container on super hot days, and I do mean the container and the plant, it helps. It helps. So consistency is the key with that one. I hear about that a ton at the beginning of the season. And now, as you can imagine, yellow is everybody's enemy.
Right.
I see yellow.
The yellow leaves. Oh no.
Yellow leaves, yellow streaking, yellow striping, yellow spots. What is it? And that's so difficult. I mean, when I wrote my book, Christy, and you do much better than I on this, I think. I kind of threw up my hands and went, okay, dudes, I could write a whole book on disease, and I could chase down those that marauder, and I'd never ever catch it.
Yeah.
And so I feel a little bit lame in the springtime, but I still do. I throw up my hands and go, yellow could mean a lot of things, people, and it's hard to diagnose through a picture. It's hard to all that. So when people, when you see when you see yellow, if it's low and down on the bottom of the plant, remove it. Mm-hmm. Often it's the plant saying, I don't need that anymore. Because I have these other great leaves up at the top. So I say, look, get rid of the yellow by removing it. Yes, when you see the plant look different in any way, make sure, go back to the basics. Sighting, where is it? Exposure, is that cool? Are you getting it enough? Are you getting it what it needs? Water and food. It's just the basics. Go back to the basics, make sure that's all there. Yes, if you're going to pull leaves off the plant, check underneath them. See if you can see things moving around and maybe ID something that might be, But look, I'm out in the garden this morning and I've got these beautiful miniature, the Better Bush plants that I'm trialing this year. And the plant it's like a what is it? It's like a bodybuilder plant. The plant is so sturdy.
Short and stout.
It is so amazing. And all of a sudden, some of the bottom leaves are getting this just round yellow leaves. And I pulled them all off this morning. That was my exercise. The plant still looks great. I didn't find anything under the leaves. Who knows? They're in containers. I'm probably being a little lazy on fertilizer, so I'll go back to basics.
Right. A lot of times when the yellow, as the tomato plant starts to focus on fruit production, it doesn't need those lower leaves. And so they just start to die off. And so people freak out about that.
They slough it off. Yellow means alarm, not red, right? Yellow means alarm in the tomato garden. And people are, and then everyone, I think this is the other thing, and this, I've often said the tomato plant and anything that we grow in a seasonal way like this is on a steady trot toward the compost pile. It's not going to, at mid-season, it is not going to look like it looked 3 weeks in. And we as gardeners, especially if we're perennial gardeners and all, we want plants to look good all the time. And that hurts a little bit for some of us, right? So farmers out there, you need to know that, no, you can't fix that. The plant's on a journey. It's not going to look as great in July as it did, end of April when it was young and spry. And that's just how it goes. So I think to a certain degree, everybody needs to take a deep breath and, make sure that they're not freaking out too much. If you need to ID something, get it to a nursery in a plastic bag and see if you can get an expert to look at it in person to help you. And I think mostly, if your gig is, you always want to see really fresh, wonderful tomatoes, then plant a tomato every 2 weeks. Yeah.
That's always such a good idea, and I never think to do that.
Plant a tomato every 2 weeks. I plant in the back first, right? Plant away from the house first, and plant in front. Plant, you get nice fresh plantings. You get succession, which is obviously a brilliant strategy for anybody doing vegetables of any kind. And it hopefully eases your eyeballs, and you don't have to look at yellow all the time. And that's a really good thing.
Yeah, and I think for small space gardeners who fill up their garden completely, as I do with tomatoes is everywhere I can, toward the end of June, some of them are pretty much starting to give up the ghost after they produce anyway. So you could pull those and put it in another one, fortify the soil and that kind of thing before trying again. And that'll get you through till probably August or maybe early
Absolutely.
September.
And look, I did a post on Facebook recently and the whole prune with the shovel, idea.
Prune with the shovel.
Look, every once in a while, you got to give it up. If you got a plant that's really ailing and you don't know what it is, so you can't address it or won't or whatever, it's time to take it out. It's time to just remove it and make sure that, again, you don't infect the rest of the garden. You sacrifice that.
I'm curious, what different soils are you trialing?
I did the Dr. Earth potting soil. because we talk about different combinations all the time, and you can talk about combinations so you're blue in the face, but the base, the premium soil, the premium potting soil that you use in a container is the key to whether you're successful or not. I really believe that.
Yeah.
Cheap, as we always say, cheap potting soils are dust, right? They just don't do anything for your plant. It's like using the same potting soil, 4 years in a row. That's broken down. There's nothing left there that's any good, and there's barely any nutrients to start. So I use Dr. Earth potting soil, and then in the other one I have the Recipe 420, which I've heard great things about.
Yeah, how's that working out?
Well, I can send you pictures of them. The plants are 3 ticks different. In other words, I'm really pleased with both of them. They look pretty amazing. Which goes back to and I think this is one thing we learned this season, Christy. I'm a really enthusiastic gardener, but I'm kind of lazy. So I'm the one who will, only take out a few shovelfuls out of that container, put new soil in, and then, rock it through the year and try to be good at fertilizing. Well, it's really obvious looking at these two. The plants are amazing. They're 4.5 feet tall.
Wow.
They're gorgeous. The one in the 420 is a little larger.
Mm-hmm.
The Dr. Earth has more fruit on it. So I'm going to call that one a draw. And, and it's kind of go, and it's just a little larger. I look at the two and I go, okay, it's a little larger. Maybe the leaf color is a little deeper in the 420, but then I start counting the fruit and I've got 15 on one and I've got 9 on the other. So who knows, right? I'm really happy with both is the bottom line. And what we've learned here is I can go to another section of the container trials, and there's what I call my lazy pots, where I didn't change out all the soil. Those plants don't look so good. They're fruiting really nicely. They're fruiting nicely, and I'm very, very pleased.
Good to know.
But the soil, we don't want to have to say that every year because it's a chore, but it works.
Yeah. Let's talk for a moment about blossom drop in containers, since you've been talking a lot about growing in containers and how they need a little bit more attention. What should we do? Because that's happening to a lot of people where they plant a tomato in a container, but it sets fruit on maybe 2 out of 10 of the flowers on each truss. What do we do to fix that?
Well, you just have to, again, it really does go back to basics. You're growing in a different universe. You're growing in an odd universe for a plant. Oh, it doesn't know that, but you are. That plant in the ground is going to have a different character. There's just no two ways about that. And depending on the soil, obviously that changes everything. But you just have to be sure to follow all the rules from the beginning. As we just said, new soil, premium potting soil is your base. So amend it with a compost, obviously. Amend it with worm castings. Stay on top of a feeding schedule, right? You're watering more in a pot. That's inevitable. You've created a perfect soil that drains. So as you water more, guess where your fertilizer's going, right? So I'm fertilizing probably every other time I water this year because I have more time. I'm putting something in there all the time, not full strength. A tomato doesn't need full strength fertilizing every 2 days or even whatever it is, every 4 days if you're watering every couple of days.
And
in the hottest part of the season, I'm watering every day. You're losing a lot of fertilizer. So you have to put a lot back in.
Right. And 2 questions. So it's 110 out there when on some days when, right. So you're watering every day, but What are you using for fertilizer?
I mix it up. That keeps me interested, frankly, and I think the plants like it too. So on one day I use the little spikes, the little organic Jobs spikes, first of all, the timed release stuff. So that's in there. So that makes me feel good. I use Dr. Earth's granular. Right? It's a well-balanced, here's the method, a well-balanced veggie and tomato fertilizer. There are lots of lines. We love this one, and we tend to rely on it. I'm using a Dr. Earth, a little pump system this year. They've got a liquid in a pump delivery.
Oh, yeah.
And the idea is pump it and then water it. Now, that's the exact same thing as everything else. But you know what? For a gardener, it's a little different. And so for me, for the human part of all this, it's kind of interesting. And I got to say, I kind of went, huh, really? And it's kind of interesting. And then again, on top of, you're growing in containers, you see the level of the soil decreasing or going down, which you inevitably will, right? That's making more room for compost and worm casting. So I've done an overlay of worm castings through the season now. And look, what are we in? 3.5 months? Yeah, it's a lot of time. That's a lot of time. And so staying on top of containers is important. Regulating, again, water, fertilizer, all of that. I'm finding that containers, Christy, are working much better in a 6 to 8 hour spot than they did last year when I had them in a 12-hour spot. Think about
sunlight. We're talking sunlight here.
Oh, yeah,
exposure.
We're talking exposure. And we're talking, I went from growing on a very breezy 12-hour sun site that was also squirrel adjacent, which was a bad thing.
Squirrel adjacent.
moved into a situation where they're getting 6 to 8. They're a little bit more sheltered from the wind, right? Again, exposure. They are not in squirrel land, which I love. They're now in dog land. And that's been huge for us. And so all those basics are important. Making sure your pot's big enough. Obviously, you can't grow a tomato in a 6-inch pot. You got to grow in something bigger than 15 by 15. More real estate works. And lastly, it's heat. It's about regulating those 110 days that you mentioned, 110 degree days. Mm-hmm. I'm gardening in pulp pots in the hottest areas. So, the pot does not heat up. But I'm also using row cover. I'm covering the plants. And whether that means a wrap or whether that means a veil or whether that means, you can call it what you like, I'm trying to take the heat off. So I have 2 in particular that I'm watching this year. 2 containers remained in that super hot area just so I could see what they did, And
like a control.
Absolutely. It's Russian Queen. I'm growing it there and I'm growing it in the ground and I'm growing it in the other cooler spot. They're killing it, but I'm doing my job. I haven't in the past. But so right now, if you went out there, I have a little white section of row cover attached to the top of the cage or the whatever I'm using, the ladder, whatever. It's clipped there and it literally is a veil. So in the morning, I go out and it's not going to be very hot today. I'm good to go. I push the veil aside. It's still there. It's still attached. I just move it. So now the plant gets, everything it's going to get. Super hot days, I take that and I wrap it around the west side of the plant. Sure, it moves a little bit and I can put it back or attach it or do whatever I want. These plants are full of fruit and doing so much better than they have in the past.
Oh, great.
It's that consistency thing, right? It takes a few degrees off. It really does. It just doesn't beat up the plant so much. And I think in containers, that's what we do. Because where do we normally, the ones I've got now are out on a dirt section on the side of the house, which is good, which is beautiful. Well, we normally put those containers on stone, concrete, asphalt. You know what? That's a lot of heat.
It's a lot of heat.
It's a lot to deal with. And so we often expect too much of those containers.
Yeah. So you opt for row cover instead of shade cloth. Interesting.
Shade cloth is heavy, right? A standard shade cloth. I mean, what a greenhouse uses, that's heavy. Yeah. You buy that at the whatever. It's more plasticky. It's nylon. It's whatever it is, and it's heavy. Shade cloth is billowy. It's taffeta. It's what's a tulle. It's so light, but you get cover. So governing it in that you don't want it moving in the wind and just sort of flying on the side of the plant and not doing its job can be kind of good or can be kind of tough. But it works really nicely in that it lets everything in. You can water and fertilize right through it, right? Yep. No worries. I'm using it now. I have lower bundles of fruit on a lot of these container tomatoes. I'm wrapping the bottom of the plant. I'm just stuffing row cover into the top of the pot. Right, to cover these bundles. Squirrels can't see those.
Oh, bird! That's great.
They are not getting to those. So yeah, it's a little odd looking, but you know what? I'm harvesting fruit. I have 3 Russian Queen plants in 3 containers, 2 in the sunny and 1 in the other measure. There are almost 190 fruits on 3 plants.
Oh,
I did the math, and not everything's working like that. This is one of my favorites, and it's not a favorite. It's not a tomato that I can wax eloquently about in terms of its taste. I just can't. But it is so beautiful. It is so beautiful, and it produces so well. And it's the first thing I picked for the last 3, 4, 5 seasons. I can't argue with that.
All right, garden nerds, that's it for this week. You'll find links to all 3 of the original podcasts from which this best of was selected. Consider becoming a Patreon subscriber to support all the free stuff that we do here at Garden Nerd. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you stream. You'll find us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok under GardenNerd1, on Facebook as Gardenerd.com, and of course our Garden Nerd YouTube channel. Happy gardening!